EVA3, please. EVA3, again, will begin by having the crew egress from the airlock. Drew Foistel will once again be on the robotic arm, and John Grunsfeld will be the free-floating crew member. The crew will be opening the aft shroud doors, and the first thing that they will be accessing is the COSTAR. Again, this is the correctives optics package, that was installed during the first servicing mission. It interfaces with 2 active latches and 1 passive latch. Once it gets removed, it will be temporarily stowed on the aft fixture that was used earlier during the first EVA. And then the crew will be retrieving the second scientific instrument, which is the COS, and they'll be retrieving it from the ASIP, which is the Axial Scientific Instrument Protective Enclosure. Again, the interfaces are 2 active latches, 1 passive latch, and the instrument comes out on some guide rails. The crew will work together to do that, and then they will install the new COS, Cosmic Origin Spectrograph, into the telescope. Again, it'll be 2 active latches, 1 passive latch. There'll be a ground strap and 4 electrical connectors in order to mate it up fully to the telescope. Again, the mass of the COS instrument is around 880 pounds. The COSTAR will then have to be retrieved from its stowage location, placed into the ASIP enclosure, and the lid will be closed and everything will be safed then for landing. At this point, the ACS part of the task begins. That's the scientific instrument that you see flashing on the right. ACS is the Advanced Camera for Surveys, and this instrument was installed during the last servicing mission. The work site is in the upper right-hand corner of the instrument, and the crew will begin by installing a foot restraint, and then John will ingress that foot restraint to access the work site. Drew will then begin to hand him some of the tools that he will need to begin the task. And the first items are the guide studs that I mentioned earlier. These guide studs will be installed, as you see there, and you can also see the grid that is over the black cover plate. So that grid will need to be removed, and this is the crew then using the grid cutter I showed you. Again, it will be installed, and as the crew drives each of the individual bolts, the grid will be able to be removed. And the entire thing will be removed as one assembly. Again, the grid cutter traps the removed part of the grid. Now you see John doing the initial releasing of the torque on each of the fasteners, again to make sure that when we come back later, none of the fastener heads are stripped out. Once that's performed, then he'll install the fastener capture plate that I showed you. Again, this will trap all of the fasteners between itself and that black cover plate that we'll be removing. Again, depending on the access, he'll either manually release some of the fasteners or use the mini power tool. The issue is really that strut in the upper right-hand corner of the video that you see. It does not help us for sure on accessing some of these fasteners. Once all of the fasteners are released, then the crew will remove the entire assembly, and now you can see that the 4 cards are accessed. First, you'll have to release some card locks on each of the cards. This item is called the wishbone, and it will be what the crew uses to mount the card extraction tool onto. Again, this is the indexing one. He starts by setting it to the number 1 position, closes the jaws around it, and then he'll drive the elevator drive blocks, which will pull the card out from its location. And then this will be repeated for all 4 of the cards. As each individual card is removed, they will be put into the enclosure that you see there. As John is working on this, Megan will be taking Drew over to the LOPE, which is the large ORU protective enclosure. Drew will open up the lid and retrieve the two items that I mentioned earlier. The first one is the CEBR. This is the replacement box that has, the first one he'll grab is the LVPSR, the low voltage power supply that you see him grabbing there. The second one is the CEBR, which is the replacement box that has the 4 cards already positioned in it. He'll first hand the box with the cards to John, and then John will install it on the same location that the old 4 cards came from. And then he'll hand off the new power supply, and John will install that onto the handrail that is on the ACS instrument itself. Once that's installed, the crew will route all of the cables, and that will complete the repair of the ACS task. Then at this point, the crew will clean up the payload bay, ingress, and that'll be the end of EVA3. And again, that's the entire completion of the ACS task. Right now we have timelined for a part 2 on EVA5. At this point, I'd like to do the same thing for the STS task, go through some of the tools so that, again, it's easier for you to follow and understand what you're seeing in the video. The main objective, again, of EVA4 is the STS repair. There'll be a large cover plate that the crew will have to remove that will access a single card inside of the scientific instrument, replace it, and then put a new cover plate on it. The crew will then begin by first using this item, which is the clamp removal tool. There is a clamp in the upper left-hand corner of the cover plate. There's 2 levers that are used to install this, and then you can see there are also 2 holes that will line up with the 2 fasteners around the clamp. Once those fasteners are released, then the clamp can come off, and this tool will capture those fasteners once released. Of course, making things a lot more fun, there's actually a handrail on the scientific instrument that the crew has to remove in order to access the cover plate. So Goddard has developed the HRT, or the handrail removal tools. We have 2 of these, one for the upper part and one for the lower part of the handrail. Again, these will install over that, and you have holes, again, for accessing the 2 fasteners. Again, 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom. Once these fasteners are released, again, this is capturing the fasteners and is also attached to the handrail, and the entire thing comes off as one assembly. In a similar fashion to what you saw with the ACS task, the crew will be installing some guide studs. These guide studs will be used to mount the fastener capture plate onto the instrument. So the first thing that the crew will actually be doing is releasing 4 fasteners in a slightly different fashion. In order to do that, they'll be using this item, which is the rib caddy. Rib stands for retainer installation bit. And one of the ribs is one of these. The item that you see at the top, the red ring up here, is the retainer ring. Of course, it's not easy enough to just have a lot of non-captive fasteners. Of course, a lot of those fasteners have to have washers also to make it a lot more fun. So what we do is we install one of these retaining rings in each of the 4 spots. What this does is the retaining ring will go around the head of the fastener and then go in behind it. It will trap the washer so that we can treat the washer and the fastener as 2 separate items and deal with them independently. Once this is installed, this will happen in all 4 spots. Then Massimino will retrieve this item, the fastener extraction bit, and he will use this to then remove the fastener itself. If you look down the middle, there's actually an Allen interface, and this will interact with the fastener head itself, and then the outside of it will grip around the fastener. So once the crew removes this fastener, it will get temporarily stowed away. And now we still have the washer and the retaining ring that we have to remove. And so, of course, we have a washer extraction tool. This tool has a tip on it that will allow you to insert it. And then as you extract the tool, it will pull the washer retainer and then the washer itself out, leaving all 4 of the cavities now open for the installation of the 4 guide studs. So you can see with these number of tools and bits how easily we get to over 60 new tools that are necessary for both the ACS and the STS task. At this point, again, the